It wouldn't be right if financial services were being denied to anyone exercising their right to lawful free speech. Our new Financial Services and Markets Act puts in place new measures to ensure that politically exposed persons are being treated in an appropriate and proportionate manner. And having consulted on the payment services regulations, we are in the process of cracking down on this practice by tightening the rules around account closures. But in the meantime, any individual can complain to the Financial Ombudsman Service, which has the power to direct a bank to reopen their account.
Well, let's talk to political analyst Emirali, who's in the studio. Morning to you. It's an odd situation, this, isn't it? Because we, primarily focusing on Nigel Farage, who is very well known and clearly has got a few quid in the bank and all the rest of it. But the whole point of this is that it actually isn't about one person, it's about the potential for this to happen to anybody.
It is, Stephen, and I think that's what's worrying about this story, is that we look at this and we see someone who's in the public eye, but the reality is a precedent has been set, and it could happen to anyone who's got views that don't align with the perceived values of any institution they choose to use. Now, banking is vital. You can't really get on in life without having a bank account. And I think if we are setting a precedent where people can be debanked for their political views, which is apparent in the papers that we've seen that Nigel Farage has released, that shows it was based on the fact they don't like his political views, they don't align with the values of the bank. Well, what does that mean for other people that have got views that might not be, politically correct or whatever we might want to define it as? And I think it's worrying for a lot of people who see this as an overstep on what the bank's responsibility should be.
Where does this leave Coutts, do you think, and where does it leave Farage as well? Because Farage has been vindicated here. We were told by the BBC, by the BBC's business presenter, that it was for commercial reasons. We now know from that file from Coutts that that isn't actually true.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing here, Ellie, is that the Reputational Risk Committee came up with a decision to debank Nigel Farage. Well, I think the reputation of Coutts has been put through the ringer over the past few days, and it's not just the decision to remove Farage's bank account, it's actually the decision to lie and cover up about the reasons behind it. And I think that's caused huge reputational damage for the bank, which effectively is part of their appeal. The reason why people bank with Coutts is because they've got this reputation. Well, that now is in tatters.
And the idea, certainly the minute that the BBC got the story from somewhere, the implication that it sort of passed directly on to them, it turned out to be a false story, but nevertheless, that in itself is concerning, whether it was true or not.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the most concerning parts of this story, is that we don't necessarily think this has been handled in a transparent and honest way. And there's this idea of the BBC's business editor, Simon Jack, cozying up to the CEO of NatWest, which owns Coutts Bank. And it just seems to be this relationship between what people could define as the establishment and trying to take on those who maybe don't align with those views. And I think it's very difficult now. There's a lot of questions to be answered of the bank, of the BBC, other media outlets that reported that misinformation as it was. And this is a story that's going to run and run, because I'm sure that Nigel's got more that he wants to share, and obviously the bank have got a reputation to protect. So this story isn't going anywhere. We could even see legislation as quickly as next week that actually stops people from being debanked.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because that is really interesting, isn't it? We just heard Rishi Sunak talking there about cracking down on banks that refuse customers essentially based on their political views. How do you think this can be enforced? What kind of legislation are we talking about here?
It's very nascent, Ellie. We don't know yet, but I think the speed in which the government have said they will legislate for this is telling, because they see this as an issue that clearly the public are going to be concerned about. So it's most likely to be some sort of format where they create a mechanism, most likely for regulators, the Financial Conduct Authority, giving them more powers to say to banks that actually you can't remove someone's ability to open an account with you just because you don't like their political views. So this is going to be an interesting couple of weeks to see what that legislation looks like, to see the pros and cons of it. But, this is going to be something that the government clearly see as a political win for themselves. And it's all over the front papers this morning, where there's inflation figures and other news that could have taken that spot. So a big story, and I think it's going to be something that we see changing the law in this country.
OK. Good to see you, as always, Lee, and we'll catch you a little bit later on.
Thank you very much.